Welcome to Manavavani, the voice of humanism. I am Babu Gogineni, and I have with me for the third episode in the series on food and culture Aditya Gunti, a celebrity chef, head chef at a top restaurant in Perth, Australia. In the earlier episodes, we'll trace the history of food, how from simply sustenance it became a source of pleasure, enjoyment, building of communities, and around which people organize their families and their lives and their trade. And especially the last episode, we looked at particular dishes that we so happily consume on a regular basis idli, biryani, and specialist items, especially from the Deccan part of India, Patthar Ka Ghost. And then we looked at how fungi become part of human diet. We spoke about mushrooms, something we did not touch on last time. But have you heard or do you remember the expression, he has gone berserk? Now, when you say somebody has gone berserk, you're really saying that person has become a bit crazy. Do you know why you say that? Because in Norway is a mushroom called berserk, and those who eat that lose their senses. And then we spoke about truffles, which can be hunted out of or smelt out of the soil, the use of pigs. We spoke about chilies. Now, do you know why birds really like to eat chilies? We see that birds are fed with, especially parrots, are fed with chilies and chili seed, whereas Indians are sweating and panting and looking for water and something sweet to calm down the heat of chili. Why don't you find out? How is it that birds do not feel the heat? And we spoke about bread and sandwich and how sandwich either was because there was this lazy person who was gambling and he did not want to get up from his desk, and therefore he got the sandwich invented, the Earl of Sandwich. Or he was a military strategist and he needed undivided attention to the maps and to the strategies, so he could not get up from the military desk. And he needed something quick, something that was nutritious, and he got the sandwich invented. Then we also spoke about food. We kept referring to food. Some people thought that food was poison, and some people thought food was medicine. And then some people think that food gives them special sexual powers, attraction. Even today, the parts of the body of many animals, unfortunate animals, that could be tigers and bears, and their penises are eaten thinking that they give special sexual prowess to men. What they need is special powers to think properly because obviously food does not have any aphrodisiac properties. Sex starts in the mind, not in the food, especially, which is mostly a superstition that has been handed down to us. But of course, food is nutrition, and certain kinds of food can help improve your brain, some can improve your health, and that is for sure. We need a balanced nutrition. But let's come back to what we wanted to do today, which is continue talking about the history of some of the things that define us. When I woke up in the morning, every day throughout my childhood and adulthood, I woke up to the smell of coffee. In fact, my father, he maintained a coffee tradition in our home that was quite renowned. Friends brought their friends to taste the coffee at my home, and it was almost a religious ritual for my non religious father. This is the case with most South Indians. Our neighbors were Tamilians, and the party, the grandmother in the neighbor's home, would wake up and roast the coffee for hours together, huge heaps, all to be consumed within a week. Roast them, grind them. It's like avakaya for Telugu people. Roasting coffee is for many in South India a similar activity. Aditya, when did it all start? How did coffee become part of our lives? Surely coffee did not originate in South India.
Hello, sir. That's a nice recap of last episodes, and I'm very excited that we have made it to episode 3. And then let's go to the story of the coffee. Coffee was not of South Indian origin, but we need to travel to Ethiopia to understand the story, how it came into existence. So there's a goat herder who used to take his goats into the farms to for their regular feed, and then one day he found that his goats are a bit more excited than regular after observing the goats had some red berries of a green bush. So he was observing these goats on every day that the goats are getting hyperactive, excited, and they are bleating loudly. He tracked them to understand why is this particular behavior, and then he understood that this is because of the berries the goats are having every day. So he tried the berries himself, and then he also felt elated. And then he filled these berries in his pocket and ran to his home to announce his discovery to his wife. And then his wife suggested him, you better take these berries to the monks so that they can tell you what these berries are. Upon his wife's instructions, advice, he went to the monks and explained the effects of these berries on him and also on the goats. And the monks exclaimed, as usual, saying that this is devil's work, and thrown these berries in the fire. Minutes later, the entire monastery was filled with aroma of the roasted beans of the berries. And the monks then crushed the berries and then covered the berry powder with hot water and left it for the night. And they had this brewed water, coffee water, at night. And they said the next day that the drink kept them awake for the whole night, because obvious reasons of caffeine in it. And then they understood that this can be taken on everyday basis for them so that they can continue their religious conversations at night. That's where coffee has come from wild to a brewing drink. And then from there, when Arab traders went to Africa, they took these berries to Middle East. During the recent years, in the year 1511, the governor of Mecca had banned the coffee, saying that it's an intoxicating drink, just like alcohol, because it is forbidden by the religion books. And then they banned it for a few years. Of course, after a few years, they lifted the ban. This coffee was also in Turkish region, and they make a different kind of coffee. If you see the coffee consumption around the world, there are different kinds of coffee, starting from salted butter coffee in Burma to South Indian filter coffee to cappuccino from Italy to Turkish coffee. When I've traveled to Qatar, Doha, I made a special visit to a Turkish coffee shop to understand how this Turkish coffee is made. This Turkish coffee, they have a special pot where they boil the coffee, finely grounded coffee powder with water and sugar, and there is a charcoal lit fire. A hot plate is set on that, and then the sand is poured on the hot plate so that the sand gets hot enough, and this special pot is left on the sand with the coffee powder, water and sugar, and they let it brew multiple times because they want a stronger coffee. And then this is shared among people in small quantities in a special Turkish coffee cup, and it is a definitely a visit to. This is definitely a must visit for everyone to a Turkish coffee shop, is what I understand. It's so delicious, it's so different than any other coffees that I had. And out of my interest, when I traveled to Indonesia, uh, I had tasted Kopi Luwak. Maybe as we was discussing many times of people who think as a disgust of some foods, it might be for them, for many of the people, that it might be a disgust because these coffee beans are brewed from the coffee beans that are digested and left by a Asian civet palm. So these berries, after the Asian palm civet, they eat this, they get fermented in its intestines, and then it leaves as a excretion, and these beans are collected, cleaned, roasted, powdered, and then brewed into your coffee. I did try this, but as a foodie, as a chef, I did not feel much difference, but there is a lot of um, a lot of interest for people to try this coffee from India.
But what a disgusting thing to talk about so early in the morning. I am in Melbourne, Australia, and Melbourne is considered one of the coffee capitals of the world. And my association with the French reminds me of the fact that the cafes, a cafe is where people go and have a coffee, like a public house, a pub where people go and have mostly alcohol. And French intellectual life has been structured around cafes. You can go to the Café Procope in Paris and still see the table at which some of the most famous people in human civilization sat, had conversations, and where some of the mathematicians did their calculations on the table, and the waiters were asked not to wipe the table because they would continue their work the next day. But what a journey, Aditya. We talk about cafe, coffee, which originally was called kahwa, wasn't it?
Yes.
And kahwa then from Ethiopia traveled around initially to the Middle East, where it was first liked and loved and then banned. And one of the sultans actually promised the death penalty for anyone who was in possession of coffee. But such was the addiction to coffee that people were still daring to deal with. This was Sultan Murad, number four, I think, of the Ottoman Empire. And people didn't mind being killed for the sake of this divine drink, which soon the church called the devil's drink, firstly because it excited people, but more importantly because it was associated with the Muslims.
Mhm.
And then there was this Catholic Pope. The Pope, I forget his name, I think it's Pope Clement, Pope Clement number eight. I think he was asked to ban coffee, And he said, how can we ban it before tasting it? And then he had a sip. And then he said, it is so delicious, this Satan's drink, that we should not simply let the non believers enjoy it, even Christians should enjoy it. And from there, of course, with the Europeans, with the Christians, the habit of coffee spread around the world. I must say something. When I was in Ethiopia, I hired a driver to take me around in Addis Ababa, the capital. And during the day, the driver asked me, do you want to come home for my daily coffee ceremony?
Hmm.
And I said, what is that? And he explained how almost every Ethiopian family which has the possibility, excuse me, will assemble in the house and have coffee. So I went to his home where his three brothers and two sisters came from different parts of the city. They do it every day. They sit down around a small fire and coffee is then brewed there and the mother serves it to everyone with popcorn. There is incense that is lit. It's a special experience. It's a family experience, and I was glad to have been invited to be part of that. And then you refer to what happens in Indonesia, this crazy, disgusting habit of picking up the feces, the waste of certain animals, and then using that half digested, semi fermented cover of the coffee bean to make some coffee.
It's also very expensive as well. I had to shell few Indonesia rupiah to taste the coffee.
What a disgusting thing, and people actually pay a lot of money for it. But you know that cow dung is used in parts of India by sections of society, not by everyone, as part of their religious ritual. And some of the rituals involve the imbibing of the waste of cow. Similar things are done with the waste of camels in the Arab world. And I know of someone in Hyderabad. Um, you see, a long time ago, as part of the many things I tried, I ran a security company. And one of the persons employed in the security company from Bihar, he told me how he was cured of a skin disease because he started drinking the urine of goats. There is something scatological about this, and to speak about it so early in the morning for us is a little odd. Let's move on to something else, something that does not have this kind of complicated history of coffee, of chai. Many people call coffee, sorry, of tea, sorry, about tea, chai. Many people talk of it as a drink, but originally it was an infusion, is it not?
Yes. So just to wrap up the coffee thing, even though the coffee started today, started in Ethiopia, today the highest consumption of coffee happens in Finland, and the highest production happens in Brazil. Because Finland is a very cold country, they 14% of people in Finland at least have 9 to 10 cups of coffee per day just to keep them warm.
But these coffees that are consumed mostly outside France and India are really black coffee,
Yes,
isn't
without
it?
the
They
milk.
don't add milk to it.
No.
They have this dark liquid that they drink.
And then our South Indians filter coffee with the froth on it is definitely a competitor for Italian cappuccino.
But let's
Let's
go
let's
to
go to tea
chai.
now. Yeah. So tea was also an accidental discovery. A Chinese farmer who was discovering vegetables and plants which are edible, he used to poison himself many times to understand what leaves can be picked, what vegetation can be picked for eating and cooking. And in that process, one day he had a leaf which made him revitalizing, and then he took this green leaf and spread it as a medicine to people. Initially, tea was not a drink, it was eaten like a dried leaf, preserved, pressed form, but later on in different dynasties, this has changed. They made into a powder or then dried and then brewed with water and then had as a drink. Basically, tea is a aromatic beverage that's prepared by pouring hot boiling water over dried leaves. It is origin to southwest China in Shang dynasty, but there are also physical evidences of tea that this could be of from 2nd century before the Common Era in Han dynasty. And this tea was introduced to Europe by Portuguese priests, and China had monopoly on this trade for many years. The Europe and the Britons were buying the tea from China, and they used to trade the tea with silver coins, which were expensive for British. So then they started to trade with opium. There is a kind of relation of tea trade and the first and second opium war between China and British, because the British felt that this is very costly and they're paying a lot of money to China for its production and buying and bringing it to England. In England, the tea has become a royalty over there. The culture of tea has started there. Today, also in Britain, there are also special meal periods for high tea, which they do 2 times a day. It's called AM tea or a morning tea or a PM tea or an evening tea. So there is a culture that is woven around the tea in British, and the tea was brought to Japan by a Japanese monk. And in Japan also you will see the similar story what you said about Ethiopia of coffee culture and coffee gathering every day. There is a Japanese tradition of tea as well in today's.
So Ethiopia is coffee tradition and Japan is tea tradition.
Yes.
Hmm.
Um, so to break this China monopoly over the tea, the British had done a covert operation to send some of its people to steal tea from China. So a few people or a person who he disguised himself, went to the mountains of the China, smuggled the tea, brought it to the China in India border to Darjeeling in the British rule when there was East India Company, and they have encouraged the farmers to do the tea plantation in India, and they used to grow a lot of tea and then export it to Britain. So that's how the tea from a royal drink now is an affordable drink for everyone. There are many there are many varieties of preparation in tea around the world. They use the leaf, they use the flowers, the chamomile flowers, the leaves in different cultures as well. In Tibetan, there's also a salted butter tea where the tea is made. I'm sorry. In China, there are different kinds of teas from starting from green tea to herbal teas, which they possess the tea with medicinal and also some supernatural powers. You know, if you see into traditional Chinese medicine, they have all these herbal teas which they promote as a remedy, as a medicine, and which is dangerous to the society for all the people's health. But the tea culture in Japan and China is without the milk. The English has added the milk to the tea to make it little more sweeter. And
Hmm.
my association with tea, as a chef, I have infused the teas in different kinds of food. I made savories like lemongrass poached chicken with lemongrass poached chicken pani puri with cashew cream. We made some Ceylon tea spiced momos and green tea and salmon onigiri sushis. We made some roast tea macaroons, Italian almond tea gatos, Earl Grey Choco Cremos with the association with Dilma tea from Sri Lanka, and also with Chef Peter Kuruvita, who is also a celebrity chef and a brand ambassador for Dilma tea. Today, China is the world's largest, still the world's largest producer of tea, and Turkey is the world's largest consumer of tea.
Um, on this on this note, I want to add some information which should be of interest to fellow humanists. Raman Madala is a Telugu humanist
Mm-hmm.
based in the US, and he's a member of the BG Facebook humanist group as well. He
Mm-hmm.
started a company called Chai Guru. Have you heard of it?
I just went through that, sir, with some.
Chai Guru is doing something very interesting. They are making coffee. So, traditional coffee, you take coffee beans and then, as you explained, they turn it into a drink. With coffee, they take the leaves of the coffee plant, the bush, and then with the leaves, they make tea. And this is now on a huge marketing um, approach and attempt. In India, they're delivering it on electric bikes. They're electric, and I'm very happy to share this information about the achievements of a fellow humanist. Their electric vehicles and mobility vehicles have been praised by Jeff Bezos of Amazon recently. He tweeted that throughout Amazon India, they will be using the machines made by Raman Madala and its team. So coffee is one of his ideas. The idea itself is not new,
Mm.
but to market it in this way, to do it through Chai Guru, and to do it in an environmentally friendly manner, um, I thought that would be of some interest. Where we're talking of coffee and tea, and here is someone who's using coffee leaves to make tea.
We spoke about different kinds of tea across the world, and then in India, coffee was brought by Arabs from Kerala, and tea was brought by British. So many of the South Indians are uh, coffee drinkers, and North Indians are chai drinkers. However,
Hmm.
in the region of Hyderabad and Telangana, we have a special tea called as Irani chai. There are,
Yes.
as there are many cultures in the world, there are so many cultures of chai or tea making. In North India, we have the masala chai, where it's an Indian version of making everything with spices. So we took the chai with the British tea with milk, and then we brewed along with spices like cardamom, cinnamon, sometimes with peppercorn, and various other spices as well. When we come to Hyderabad, we have used the cooking in making of the Irani chai. In the first episode, we spoke about the Osmania biscuit, and this combination of Osmania biscuit and Irani chai goes well with each other so nicely because the texture of the Osmania biscuit is so porous, and when you dip this into the Irani chai, it sucks the sugars in the tea and also the tea flavor, and then you can bite. You can actually eat the tea. You're not sipping the tea, you can eat the tea. That's how the transformation happened in Telangana and Hyderabad region, where the tea leaves are brewed with a lid on top. So it is cooked to death. That's what I say, because in other cuisines like China, they don't want to breathe, even in British, they don't want to breathe the tea for longer time because they feel the tannins come in there and it makes it very bitter and it's not good for health. They've got all their obvious reasons. But in India, we like to kill our tea by brewing it for a longer time with the addition of masalas again. In the Irani chai, we add cardamom and we also use mawa or koa, and we simmer the milk for a long time so that the natural sugar, the lactose in the sugar, gets caramelized and gives that caramel flavor to the tea, which is very, very addictive. I can have at least 2 to 3 cups of tea whenever I go to Hyderabad.
And then there is the specially Indian, um, what shall I say, bent to the taste of tea. They put ginger in it.
Yes.
Um, I don't know why we have to. Um,
It is Indianizing. It's an Indianizing version of making everything
but
into
there should
in.
be limits. I mean, there should be a law against what all you can add in your tea and still call it tea. That's what I mean.
Yeah, the Indians love the spices and they infuse different kind of spices into the teas. You said ginger, there's also pepper's been added, there's also cinnamon been added. I don't know whether if you can call the kashayam that in Telugu land they make during the olden period. They say that this is helps for fever. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe we would it be considered as a chai as well?
Because it's not an infusion to start with, maybe
Mm-hmm.
not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't know. To me, there is no real link between the original tea and what is consumed on a daily basis around the world. They've transformed it, obviously to their pleasure. I don't know if it should be called tea anymore. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, in Tibet they have a peculiar kind of tea where they put salt and butter to tea, and then they brew it along, and then they churn it, and then make into a tea. It's a
Are
kind
you
of
sure this is not a keto diet?
this is a tradition. There's a tradition in maybe the keto diet people would have taken from there, but it's a traditional way of tea, like masala chai from North India. This is a traditional chai from Tibet, and they also have the culture of same making, brewing, sipping into this tea as a gathering, as a formal celebration on a daily basis.
Mm. While we are talking about tea and coffee, are there other non alcoholic drinks that people regularly consume in the manner of tea and coffee? Do you know of any?
Mm, it's nothing is coming to my mind as of now.
Which means it's either alcohol or it is tea and coffee.
Yeah,
Maybe chocolate, but not at that level.
yeah. Chocolate drink, you mean?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then we also
Um,
infuse our teas and coffees with chocolate in the new trends. It's become fashion as well.
yeah, as well. Yes, yes. If you go to a Starbucks, you don't know which one is which. They're
they,
all mixed up.
they call it a
And then
macchiata,
when
if I'm not wrong. Sorry,
come again, please.
I think it's called as mocha coffee and macchiata with chocolate and coffee. They mix it together.
That is correct. Yes, yes. And then in the um, warmer part of the world, especially in India, lassi might be a drink,
Yeah.
but nothing at the level and scale at
No,
which tea
definitely not.
and coffee have occupied human habits, and nothing which has become so much a part of international trade.
Yeah. It's become a part of cultural activity in many of the countries. The consumption of tea and coffee in British, the high tea is a very big event. Even in many countries now, in hotels and restaurants, we have a special meal period for high teas to to take this tradition of British tea drinking to the next level. We generally have the British generally have scones and with the heavy clotted cream with the tea, whereas Hyderabadis eat with Osmania biscuit and the coffee and teas in Turkey, they are consumed with a sweet delicacy called as Turkish delights as well. So there is food and tea that goes along with. And if you see into Japan and China, they also infuse the green tea flavors. Now the trend has become very fashion. They put everything, every food with green tea, and they call it as a healthy option. They put the green tea into desserts, into food, into rice, and they call it's a healthy option to have green tea.
Is that founded in real nutrition understanding or a fad?
It's definitely a fad, sir.
Yeah. And about detox, I'm sure we'll talk about that in a
Yeah.
future episode. All this detox food that people talk about. Clearly, it's utter rubbish to talk about food that cleanses your body. That's what kidneys do, right?
Yes.
But coming back to, I think tea and coffee are so interesting. We probably will be devoting almost all of today's episode to these drinks of the devil, so to say, which the Pope found to be divine. We mentioned the French cafes where people meet regularly to discuss, to argue, to do science, to propound philosophy. So they become something like what is the Adda for the Bengali, where people congregate and
Mm.
exchange ideas, fight with each other. In Hyderabad, you mentioned Irani coffee, sorry, Irani chai. But there are Irani cafes in Hyderabad, which is a special tradition, is it not?
Yes.
You can go and you can sit down in the cafe and even without ordering anything, stay there for hours together. When people want to talk to each other, they go to a cafe, an Irani cafe, and sit there and maybe occasionally order a chai. And I think probably it is uniquely Hyderabadi. You ask for cutting chai and you
Yeah.
ask for 1 by 2 chai and 1 by 3 chai.
Cutting chai is generally from Mumbai. 1 by 2 chai is from Hyderabad because they have a different cutting
Ah,
chai glass in Mumbai. It's from Mumbai, cutting chai.
what is cutting chai?
They have a special glass. Whenever you think of a tea, you can, if in India, you can imagine of a glass, tea glass, if, tea glass in which the tea is served. So that special glass which have got cuts on it, and then the tea which is single tea which is served in two of those glasses is generally called as cutting chai in Mumbai. That's where it started, the name, the cutting chai. And then today,
Right.
as you said, that all over the world people come together to have a discussion. The international treaties and memorandums, political discussions happen over tea in at different levels, from starting from international level, and then in India also, it's a daily habit for many people to discuss political, sports, cinema over a tea and a coffee in the morning breaks. So that's important. Tea and coffees are in our lives.
Well, I think always, any day, I would welcome international treaties happening over tea and coffee because those who tried other drinks have failed at international diplomacy. Russia's Putin was found drunk after his regular um, intake of alcohol at a negotiating table. We don't want to be disgraced that way. But coming back to 1 by 2 and 1 by 3 teas, excuse me. For those who are not familiar with this, it is where you order an inexpensive tea, which probably costs 5 rupees or 10 rupees. And then that single glass is shared by two or three people. The content. So the content is poured into two glasses or three. There's hardly anything to drink, but that at least legitimizes your day long stay in that cafe.
And occupies
That
other
I
people as
found
well.
very unique.
Yes, sir, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
I said that the small amount of tea that they distribute to other friends also will keep them together to
Oh,
keep them busy
yes.
as well. That's where we would have started. If I'm having a tea, I don't want to. I may not have the money to offer you a full cup of tea, so that's where the cutting chai of, we share this. So you have a sip, I have a sip.
Remember, we discussed, you asked me about copain,
Yes.
and I explained to you that when you broke bread, which is a Christian formulation, Jesus broke bread with his people on the supposed Last Supper. People who break bread together are those who eat together. So, like copain, maybe you should have co-tea or something, those who share their tea. Clearly, around tea and coffee, so much has happened. And religion interfered, kings interfered, trade was a result of this, wars were a consequence of that kind of trade. And today we know that it is part of a major economic model. We have Coffee Republic and Cafe Day, and you know the tragic story of the head of um, this coffee chain who committed suicide because his investments went bad
Oh,
in
yeah.
India.
Yes.
So there's a lot about this, and at one point we should talk about a very impressive worldwide business around alcoholic drinks, the wine industry, the whiskey, and well, we can talk about it in a different episode. But if you look at how early economies were constructed, they were constructed around food, which is why the Europeans wanted to find an easy way of reaching India to get cardamom and various spices, cloves and cardamom being the most important for them.
Is the China Silk Route is also associated with these kinds of trades of porcelain, tea, spices?
Absolutely. So the early trade, the early international trade was really around food, around spices, and clothes. The fine silks of China, of some parts of India, were a magnet to the world. The spices of one country or the other made those envious of those even take up war to have access to those spices. Almost like how we have wars today for petrol. It's interesting. It's interesting that tens of millions of people's lives were linked with the trade and the industry associated with food and drink. But of course, the modern economy is structured differently now. As we come towards the end of today's episode, let us celebrate two drinks that have become part of human culture in a mostly positive way that hardly do much damage to the human health and promote conviviality, promote people meeting together, gathering together in the public space and in the private areas, which is the way people are kept together. I remember once again the coffee ceremony and how special it was to the family. You mentioned the ceremony of tea in Japan. It was almost religious, ritualistic, isn't it?
Yes.
What we don't know is whether this was uniquely because it was part of human culture where people wanted to get together, or if all of this had some religious, mystical significance. If we have the time, we will explore that in some future episodes. We intended to do one episode, I think, in the beginning. It
Yes.
became two. We are in three, and we are not even at high tea. There is so much more. We have many more courses to serve of the dinner that should come later. For the next episode, Aditya, I'd like you to talk to us about. Today, we spoke about what almost everyone consumes. By the way, I do not drink tea or coffee at all myself,
Me neither.
except and it's funny that those who don't drink alcohol are called teetotalers,
Yeah.
and the sound T is part of that. But of course, it's meant for alcohol. I'm a teetotaler, and I don't take tea or coffee either. But in Melbourne, where some days it is very cold, I have made an exception to keep alive and have some coffee now and then. But for the next episode, not what everyone consumes, but what may be special food. Food that only certain people eat, only certain kinds of people are willing to eat, and food that is so expensive that only some can afford to buy it. I'd like you to help us understand those things, Aditya.
Definitely, sir. Looking forward. Today has been a great episode, sipping these hot beverages with my copa, and I really have to thank you, Sri Madam Josna Palvai Garu and Nishant Garu, and Saha Indian Humanists, and Manavani, the voice of humanism. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful, and indeed, the leaders and the volunteers that you have mentioned, and the teams that are helping this happen, they deserve a nice warm cup of tea.
Definitely, so we should invite them for this tea ceremony one day.
Yes, I didn't say hot because this tea ceremony, the coffee ceremony I saw was not about the heat. They waited for it to be a little warm before they started consuming it. Strange.
Mm, mm. That's something new to know for me as well.
Well, and the opposite of that is true in South India. Your
That just
coffee
came into
should be
my
so
mind.
piping hot.
Yeah, imagine someone brings to you a cold cup of coffee or tea in India. That's a big problem.
Well, cold coffee is drunk, is it not?
That's a part of fashion again. It's a emerging or emerged culture, but traditionally tea, even in normal families today, tea is a hot beverage for them. It has to be served hot, and if it goes flat and cold or at least room temperature, they say it's not good. I don't want to have this. And the many families, the wife and husband, fighting on this as well.
Indeed, it's all very funny and strange. What is good for one culture is simply the habit of that culture. And if it's different elsewhere, it's different elsewhere. I had an English friend who was, I must say, who was disgusted by, in England, by people adding milk to their coffee.
Hmm.
He said, how do you call it coffee now? He didn't like milk being added to tea either.
Many people does not like their milk in the tea. But nowadays, people are coming with soya milk, almond milk because of the allergies or the new flavors that people want to try around. And if you, as we spoke in China and Japan, there is no culture of adding milk to it. Only in English, Europe, and India, and then to America, again, it's a fashion to have cold coffees and coffees in the morning. But generally, when you say coffee, there are many kinds of coffee from cappuccino, espresso, ristretto, macchiato, flat white, the different varieties on the ratios of milk to decoction or the strength of the decoction itself. So it's,
Mm.
many people have got their own favorites of combinations, ratios, the level of concentration of the decoction, how it is brewed. Many people in Australia would only like to have a barista coffee, not a pre-made coffee. In India, we want to have a filter coffee where you have a special small filter where you put the coffee powder along, chicory and coffee powder mixture along with hot water and let it filter the only the water to the down to the bottom vessel, and then you make coffee out of it using a hand technique of pouring from heights into the tumbler from the cup, and then you do it reverse from left to right hand and generating a froth. So that's how it is South Indian coffee. I think the great discussion today to have about coffee and teas.
So many things we have explored. And I am reminded of some conversations at home when relatives came home and they spoke about what a great coffee they had at this particular railway station.
Hmm.
You know, coming from Guntur, they would say, try the coffee in Tenali railway station. It's really very good. And then, of course, there is a legend. It's not clear if it's true or not that chaiwalas can become prime ministers. On that note, we shall sign off. Aditya, thank you very much for being with me today. And as I said, the next episode, we will explore some extraordinary food, taboo for some, unaffordable for others, indifferent for some, but let's explore them in the next episode.
Sure, sir. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.